What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we are going to look at fear, and we're going to look at how fear can have an impact on the pain that you feel on a day-to-day. And we're going to look at how fear is actually holding you back from getting back to the place that you want to be when you have had an injury. And it's a lot more subtle as well. People don't realize how subtle fear is when it comes into play, because a lot of the times you're going to shut something off before you even consider it. And you don't realize why that is. And that's why I want to talk about this a small bit more, because oftentimes people think, okay, no, it's because of the pain. And then people say, no, it's because of the injury itself. And then people say, no, it's actually because I'm lacking confidence. But when you really get to the core of it, it's the fear that's affecting them and the fear that's holding them back from getting to where they want to get to. And oftentimes with something like this, it's justified fear in a lot of ways, because it has come on over time and it's built up and it's gotten worse and worse. When we don't realize that it's a mindset that's driving it, like is the initial thing that's kicking it all off. And then I'll talk about how the body reacts to this after. But once we start to understand that it's a learned or a trained response, then we can focus on, it changes our mindset from, oh my God, I'm fighting against this thing, to this is actually something I can work on to improve. And that's why I'm going to push in this podcast to really focus on trying to change your mindset. And it's something that I push on Instagram all the time, because mindset is key. It's going to be the thing that will allow you to change your life and your lifestyle, and then change how your body reacts to your on a day-to-day, to the exercise that you do, to the activities that you do. I'm going to start the podcast off. I'm going to talk about the effects from dealing with an injury and how fear can contribute to the position that you find yourself in now, or how if you catch this early and you nip it in the bud, or even if you just look at this and you focus on changing it, how it can have an impact on your life. And the knock-on effects, the butterfly effects of it, are huge. When we see people who are afraid of doing anything that's not perfect because they fear that they're going to injure their back. Now, I'm going to use the back as a chronic injury, but you can or persistent pain. But you can look at the same thing when you are looking at a shoulder issue or a neck issue, or you can look at it if you're looking at a knee or a hip. Really, a persistent pain is something that comes on and doesn't go away for 3 to 6 months, and then it continues to aggravate you. It continues to flare up at times, and it doesn't follow the same pattern as what, let's say, an acute injury is. And I'm going to come back to this and talk about it a small bit more later on. But an acute injury is really, when you sprain an ankle, you've sprained an ankle. And you know that you sprained an ankle, and you understand that when you stretch that ligament, you're going to have pain, because it's a natural response. The area is injured, the tissue is injured, so the body's going to give you pain to stop you moving that area while it heals. But when you look at a persistent or a chronic injury, what happens is the signals that go off, the alarms that go off in the body for pain, never dampen down after the initial issue has cleared up. So you have this consistent or persistent pain that comes back, and it flares up at different times due to so many different factors. There's so many things that are contributing to this. It's amazing when you actually get an understanding of it, and you kind of dive deeper into it, when you figure out like how many things in your environment, your mindset, your activity, the way that you think about your body, all of these things, all your beliefs, all your attitudes, how they can actually contribute to this, and how they can contribute to it sticking around longer than it should. And most of it is subconscious. Some of it's conscious, but a lot of times it's the way how you feed, what you feed yourself, and the language you use. All of these things play a huge role in it developing and it sticking around for longer. And it's interesting because it's not, how do I say this? It's not your fault that this happens. This isn't something that you put yourself into position and you slowly but surely just kept on thinking about, I'm going to make this worse. This is just a reaction. It's like an action-reaction type of thing. It's an idea that something happens and then you could be in a negative cycle at that time, and then that reinforces it. So you continually think negatively about it, and then it continually builds up. Now, it's a very simple way of looking at it, but in a very general way, that's kind of what's happening. But it does come to feel like our bodies are broken, and it can drive us to start setting limitations on us. On a day-to-day, we might love walking, or we might love running with a group, or we might love going on a city break with our family or our friends. And now the idea of that is becoming more and more shadowed or overshadowed, and it seems like it's a bigger issue than it's worth. Because if you go on a city break now, you know you have to do a lot of walking, you know you have to do a lot of activity. You're up in the morning, there's a lot of different buses, or you have to sit in a car for a long time, or you're in a different bed, and you know that affects the way you sleep. Now these things start to dim your experience, because you feel that if you go into that position, that your back is going to start kicking up more. And this is really common that this happens to people. And it's all like, if you, and I'm always going to use the example of the sprained ankle, and then I'm going to use the example of the persistent back pain, because it's a very easy example to match up. And the way that the persistent back pain happens and it develops over time is because we use a thinking or thought process that is relative to the sprained ankle. Okay? And I will explain why. If you sprained your ankle and you have to go on a city break, the last thing you want to do is go walking for 4 or 5 hours, because you know that that's going to swell up, it's going to give you a lot of pain, and it's probably going to delay the healing phase of it, because you're going to maybe not delay it, but it'll definitely put a bit more pressure on it, and you're going to feel it a lot more. Now, that's because there's an acute injury there. But when you look at a persistent pain in your back, and you are continually judging that the same way, although you can still get the pain from it, the initial injury has healed up. So what's actually happening is your body is reacting to it, and it's giving you a lot of pain, not because there's an injury there, just because that's the reaction. That's what I'm going to call a trained response, or a learned response in ways, or a hypersensitive nervous system. And I talk about this in an email guide. If you want to look it up, I'll pop it in the description below. It discusses how these things develop, and it goes into a lot more detail on like the specifics of how they develop, and how on your nervous system you get this burn spot, and how this burn spot then continues to flare up whenever you overstress it. So it's not that you've injured the back anymore, it's just you've aggravated the burn spot, and that's why you get a lot of pain and you get a lot of tightness as a result of that. Now, it does come to feel like when you do this every time, and every time you do it, your back starts to get really sore again. We start to feel like our body is broken, and as I said, it's going to make us limit what we do going forward. So that city break is overshadowed now, and you start to plan less of those, and you start to plan less days out as a result, because you can see the interesting thing about limitations, and this is a really powerful way to think about it, is that when you set a limit on something, oftentimes that limit never actually gets tested. So you never test the limit to improve it, okay? But what happens is you will continually set other limits based off of that limit. So it'll be, I can't run a 10k. Okay, I can't run a 5k now because the pain starts to kick up. Okay, now I'm not able to run at all. So all I have is walking, and now walking is getting really bad. So now I can't walk for longer than 15 or 20 minutes. And that starts off from people who are able to run at the start, and slowly but surely they, instead of testing the limit, they add more limits along the way. And this is why it's really dangerous to set limits on yourself early in life for what you can do and what you can't do, because you'll only continue to build on those limits as you get older. Really, really important to understand that. And it's something I push so much, because although fear can make us set limits, if you start to do this, you're going to feel by the time you're 40 years old, 45 years old, that everything is going downhill, that you can't do anything that you were able to do when you were younger. And it's going to build a lot of resentment. It's going to build a lot of resentment, I guess, in your body is a way of you're going to start to think a lot more negatively about your body because of this. But these are limits that you set on yourself, remember. This is a mental framework that you're starting to work off of now because of the way the body's reacting. And maybe it's because you've went down and you've tried out loads of different things and they didn't work. And now you're feeling, okay, this is what I'm left with. But there is always another way to approach two things. So this idea of the fear of, okay, right, I can't do this, I'm not able to run a 10k, I'm not able to run a 5k, I'm not able to exercise for long periods, I'm not able to go for long walks, I prefer not to go to outings with the family because it's going to cause me pain for 2 or 3 or 4 days after. What will happen now is because we have stopped doing these things, the body starts to get deconditioned. So now even if we have to do it, let's say we have to go for we're going to meet a family friends in another city. When you go there, your chances of it flaring up are so much higher than usual because you've added this extra layer of deconditioning on top of the fear and on top of the anxiety and on top of the pain or the learned response. Or I'm going to use the learned response I'm going to call it the burn spot because it's simpler. So you're adding deconditioning up on top of this burn spot, which is going to flare it up even more. So the body continues, the level of activity that's able to tolerate continues to drop, okay? And every time that we go out and we do something, that's reinforced. So it drops even more, we set more limitations on ourselves, and it continues to happen. And you can see, hopefully now you can see how this develops into all right, I can't do anything now at all anymore. And you'll notice it actually starting kicking up with even the slightest change in routine or the slightest change in something that you've done. It could be that you just have to go out and do a bit of gardening, okay? It could be that you have to do a bit of manual labor where you're moving stuff out of a house. Do you know there's a really interesting one that a lot of back flare-ups happen when people are moving house. And this might not relate to anyone, or it could resonate with some people here, but when you're moving house, there's a lot more stress involved than people expect. You have to pack up all your stuff. It's a lot more physical activity. I would love to get the stat on this, but I know when I was looking up, when I was reading through the research recently, they found that moving house had a significantly higher impact on people, and it wasn't just because it was the physical activity. It was because of all the stress, and you're moving into a new bed, and so much more involved with it. But even the idea of just unpacking your house was getting things to flare up, which I think is interesting. No, we become so deconditioned to these things, and then people wonder then why they go down and they go to pick up a child and it just, everything goes really bad. Everything gets bad fast because of that, because we've aggravated the burn spot and we have caused it to react. Okay, so we knew the thing about this is, I know it's going to sound like scary, or it can sound like I don't want to be adding any more fear to what's already there, but we will come around and I will tell you that it is possible to fix it, and I'll tell you how you can do it. So if you bear with me as we go through this, but I need to talk about these fears so that people get an understanding that it happens to everybody. It's not just you. You're not the only one dealing with this right now. It happens to everybody. And the earlier you nip it in the bud, the earlier you can change it. So that's why I wanted to make this. So as I said, you'll notice it kicking up with the slightest increase in a change of routine. And after a while, the only real comfortable position that you're going to get, or you're going to be able to find yourself in, is when you're resting. You'll find that rest is the only thing that feels comfortable. Everything else feels like it's way worse, and it feels like it's going to cause you trouble to do anything else. Now, when you look at resting for a while, what's going to happen is, because you have no activity levels, because your activity levels have dropped off so much when you're resting, is that your mental and your physical health will take a hit. And this will only add to the fear, and this will only add to the low mood, and it'll cause that cycle to be reinforced and continued. And I want to emphasize that point, because it is so important that I hope you are beginning to see how sometimes just when we don't catch these thought processes, we don't catch these kind of mental frameworks that we run off of, based off of, as I said, it could be something because a doctor told you to stop running, which I've heard. Just this week, I've heard maybe 3 or 4 people tell me that their medical practitioner told them to stop exercising or told them to stop running. Surely that's going to add to the fear, Surely that's going to go on Instagram. I put up a post last week or a couple of weeks ago on Instagram about one of the biggest physiotherapy pages on Instagram, over 1 million followers, and they were telling people to not bend their back. Absolute bullshit. How could you even consider doing that? It's bad practice. They've been called out for it multiple times. I'm not going to get into it now, but it's crazy because they're adding to the fear. Now, people will believe that. And then the other thing is that when you look at medical professionals, everyone has their own kind of specialty. So a orthopedic surgeon doesn't know physio. Okay, they understand the basis of it, but they don't know it that much. Physios, we don't know speech and language therapy, or we don't know the medical side of it. Let's say the prescriptions, all doctors obviously have a way better knowledge of the whole body and the whole, like all of the systems. But when it comes to injuries and it comes to rehabbing injuries, that's a specialty within physio. And obviously there's like respiratory, cardiovascular, there's a lot more involved in neurological. There's a lot more involved in it as well. But you have to understand that each discipline knows their discipline. If you go to a nutritionist asking them how to heal an injury, they will only tell you what the nutritional aspects of that is. They can't tell you anything else. And that's why it's important to understand who you're going to when you are doing this. And that's why when you do go to these certain professions, how you get given a diagnosis or you get given a mode of treatment that doesn't work, because they haven't dealt with that. Even within physio, very few physios that I have met know how to deal with a chronic injury. And I'm going to say that straight out, because a lot of them really don't, because they don't understand pain. They're used to just getting people in and out, like in private physio, stuff like that. They're used to just getting them in and out the door, and they don't understand that there's a lot more involved in the lifestyle side of it. A lot of the tests that they do in physio are completely outdated now. I'm not going to go down on this too much further, but a lot of them are outdated, and they're still using them. Like I remember when I was doing my master's, they told me, this is a test you have to have to pass the exam, but you won't use it outside of here. That is crazy. Like, how can why are you teaching that if that is the case? But anyway, I'm going to come back. The reason I say that is because I know some people here have been led down a path of like medical professionals where they go through one to the next and they jump around and you're trying out loads of different things, and then it feels like there's no way to fix it because you've tried so many different things. Unless you go to someone who specializes in like chronic injuries or persistent issues, you're going to get the same, as I mentioned earlier on, you're going to get the acute treatment for a chronic issue, and that's not what you need. A flare-up is a flare-up of a chronic issue. It's not a flare-up of an acute injury. And that's why when people say I bent down to pick something up and it flared off again, and then they go and they look to get acute treatment on that, massage, painkillers, a couple of basic exercises, a couple of cat-cows, stuff like that. They wonder bird dogs, and then they wonder then why it continues on for 3 to 6 months after, and it's still sore then, and it keeps coming back 5 or 6 times. Each year they get these flare-ups 5 or 6 times in the year, and they have to sit out of work then for a while because they've been treated for something that's in a chronic or persistent injury. They've been treated and they've been taken down the acute path of dealing with that injury. I hope that makes sense to people. I want you to understand that the body is really strong and it's very adaptable. And if you can train yourself to have a learned response, not that you meant to train yourself, but based off of what you've been told from professionals as well as your reactions to the injuries and everything around it, you have to understand that the body is extremely strong and it's extremely adaptable in so many ways. And not all pain means that we have injury. We've actually injured the area. And that's why I really want to talk about the difference between an acute and a chronic injury. Completely different mode of work. And I'm sure in 50 years' time, they're going to be able to break down and they're going to look at acute injuries and they're going to have loads of different levels to an acute injury, and then they're going to have loads of different levels to a chronic injury, and they're going to be able to talk about them as two completely different things. But right now we're still at the phase that go into your local physiotherapy place and tell them that or your clinic and tell them that you have back pain and you're most likely going to come out with a massage. Like, that's not a treatment. It's an adjunct, something that you use in line with a treatment. The other thing you're going to get is your McGill Big 3, which is do your bird dogs and do your cat cows and this is going to fix it. No, it doesn't. That may help to treat a acute back injury, but not a chronic one. What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast. So I want to talk about all those different things because I know many people who are listening to this have been brought down that path and have probably been told all these different things to fix a back injury, but then the back injury keeps coming back and now you feel like it's all failed. So the first fear that I wanted to talk about is the idea that people are afraid to do anything that's not absolutely perfect, like lifting in a perfect way, moving in a perfect way. There's no such thing as perfect. And if you have that belief, it's going to affect your ability to progress, because you're always going to be afraid that if you do something wrong, that it's going to cause it to kick off. The body is strong and adaptable. Try to build it up in every way and every movement, because that's when you'll see the long-term progress. The next one then is the idea that it's going to only get worse with age, and it's only going to progress with age. This is a fear that crops up so often, and the people that I've talked to during the week, what am I saying during the week? The people I've talked to for the last 6 years on this subject, but in terms of literally in the last week, I've had a couple of calls with people who have back injuries specifically, because I'll talk about this later now, but I have a back course out at the moment, so I'm talking to a lot more people around that, are really afraid that because the way it is now, it's only going to get worse, and that the limitations they've set in themselves, they don't realize it, but they've already set it up so that they will progress and they will get worse because of the way they're thinking. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing with them or talking to them about is reframing that and making sure that we change that idea. Because if you're able to go to the gym and build muscle at any age, that means that you can fix these issues at any age. Okay, because it's the exact same. You're working a bit more on the neurological side of things, that's okay, but it can be trained. So the fear that you're getting older and it's only going to get worse from here, in a way, is a justified fear. And this is a lot of ways, in a lot of times I should say, this is how it has developed. And correct me if I'm wrong with this one, either it resonates with you or it doesn't resonate with you, that you have seen people before you with a similar injury and it deteriorates as they get older. It could be someone in your family, it could be a relative, or it could be a friend, or it could be within a friend's family that you heard about. And they got something, a diagnosis that was on an MRI, whether that be a bulging disc, degenerative disc disease, spondylolysis. I know they're two cool words, two mad looking words, but they just mean slipping of the vertebrae. Could be scoliosis. All of these normal results on a scan. If you are over, here's a stat for you. If you're over 50 years old, you have an 80% chance to have degenerative disc disease with no pain. 80%. So if you didn't have it, and if you went in an MRI and you didn't have that, I'd be like, that is amazing. How did you come away with that? So we need to, bulging disc, once you're over 30 years old, you have a 1 in 3 chance of having a bulging disc with no pain. So when we come to understand that, we can have results on an MRI that aren't actually indicative of the pain that we're feeling, because the results in the MRI will not show you the nervous system, and they will not show you the burn spot on the nervous system. So when we have a good understanding that we can have these results with no issue or no pain, and they're not related to the pain, then that changes the whole idea. So when you've heard of somebody who had a bulging disc and then they had to stop work, they had to stop all activity, they couldn't do anything else, and now they're just getting older and they're deteriorating, I want you to go back to the very first point that I made, and I want you to consider that in this situation, and consider how that happened to this person. Where the knock-on effects, the fear of them feeling that they're going to make it worse, what they've been told by medical professionals, making sure if they get any pain, they think that that's the worst thing ever and that's causing it to deteriorate, and they have that, and then you extend it over 15 to 20 years, that's how these people get in that situation. Because we need to understand that they didn't have the same options available to them as well. And the way, it's only now that we're really starting to come to the idea that the chronic injuries and the acute injuries are different, and before they would have just been treated for an acute injury consistently all of the time, and I guess the way of looking at it is like medicine before was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. That's what they were really doing with these issues, because they were just forcing a certain approach on it, and if it wasn't working, they would just move on to the next person, and if it wasn't working, they move on to the next person. Like nerve blocks. That, like, the fact that they give nerve blocks to people with back pain is crazy. The fact that they do a spinal fusion, I would love to see the results of a spinal fusion long term. And I'm not knocking anyone here who's had this, or if you know anyone who's had it, because I can't imagine that you went into the doctor and you said, I need a spinal fusion, that's what I need. I'm sure that that's what was recommended to you. I say, like, this is one of your options. But a spinal fusion is just basically, if the body wanted to do that, it would do that itself naturally. Otherwise, you're just stopping all movement there completely. There's some crazy, I might do a podcast on it someday. There are some crazy results or some crazy surgeries that they do and that really don't make any sense at all. But they continue to do them. It's madness. But instead of looking at the cause and what's actually contributing, they just continue to fix the sign and hopefully that works. But anyway, as I said, medicine before, they were really trying to fit that square peg. They were just jamming it in the round hole and hopefully that works. And everything was treated the same. But now that we understand it's different, and now that we understand that it's more of a mind-body approach that needs to be taken. It's funny that I just mentioned, now we understand. It's not that the Chinese have been talking about this for the last 3,000 years or whatever length of time Chinese medicine has been around. It's not that they've mentioned and continue to mention that the mind-body approach was extremely important, that it's all connected, and that we need to look at the mind-body, like we need to look at the psychological, we need to look at the physical, we need to look at the spiritual, we need to look at the social. How many people consider, here's one for you, how many people consider that a back injury could be a result of a conflict that they're having with, or back pain could be a result of a conflict that they're having with somebody in their circle? I bet you haven't considered that before, that the pain that you're getting is because you have conflict with somebody in your circle, that's contributing to the pain that you have right now. And I've seen this so many times. I've talked about it on loads of podcasts where I've worked with people who've had pain, loads of pain. They've been out of work, and then the idea of getting back to work was contributing to their pain, and it was kicking up. Even though we'd all of the work done, we were 100%. They were able to run 5k, they were able to cycle 30k, they were able to swim mad distances. But as soon as the prospect of work and having to get back into work was brought up, the pain would flare up significantly again, and it would all kick off. Why? That's taking into account the social side of things, and making sure that you need to understand that can have a huge effect on it. But I bet you nobody has mentioned that to you before, because it's crazy. People don't really have an understanding of how these chronic issues or injuries build up over time, and that's why we need to get a better understanding of it. We need to push the letter out. We need to push the limitations of what we understand, and what we understand how it can have an effect on it. And if you're able to isolate that, this is the thing, if you can isolate that, there's strategies you can use to work on that in the social situation. But if you had no idea that was contributing to it at all, it'd be very hard to get back to work, because you would, every time you thought about it and you had to meet that person at work, the pain is going to kick up again. And you're not going to go to work as a result of that. I just want you to think about that. We need to understand the mind-body approach. And as I said, it's been in Chinese medicine for thousands of years, but everything the Chinese do at the moment supposedly is wrong, so we can't accept anything. If you look at the news anyway, but that's a different story. They have a lot of this stuff. They have a very interesting approach to these issues. And I think that we need to look into that approach a small bit more. That's why I never disregard any of when I hear people talking about I went to this person, I went to a healer, I went to this, like acupuncture, I went to all these different factors. I think they're always good options, and you're going to have different things that work for different people. There's a reason they've lasted the test of time, you could say. But once we understand it's that mind-body approach, we can start to fix these things. We can understand that the effect of the nervous system on pain can be learned. That means that it can be unlearned. That means that it can be fixed, or we can learn a better strategy. And what all of this happens, or when you look at all these fears and when they start to build up, you're looking at how the fear, this last one as well, as it progresses with age, what the next one to this is that you'll never be able to enjoy life after it, because you're always going to have to consider back pain. That's a big fear for people as well, and that's another very understandable one, because if every time you try to do something, you're getting a lot of pain, you can just see how that would really put a cloud over your life, because how can you enjoy anything? So if we do understand, as I said earlier on, that there's a difference in these type of injuries and that they can be fixed, and it just takes a different approach to it, then we can make a big change. And I'm 100%, I've seen it so many times. And it's not something that you fix with one exercise. It's not something that you fix with just, okay, do this exercise or get a massage and it's going to go away. It's something that takes consistent work to fix. Consistent work, but it can be fixed. Now, we are coming to the last portion of the podcast, And in this portion of it, I want to talk about, this is a fear that has popped up with people I work with a lot. And I think it's a fear, but it's at the same time, it's a massive sign and a positive note for change. And it's the fear that the body is fighting against what the mind wants, where you feel your body and your mind are in two different places. Your mind wants you to improve and wants you to get into the right place, but your body is still saying, no, I can't do that. And it feels like the mind has made the decision to improve, but the body is pulling back. It's not following suit. The reason that I say this is positive is because this is when you've come to the point that you understand that, okay, in your mind, you want to make the change. Because a lot of people, when they're dealing with issues, they don't want to make the full change just yet. But at this point, you want to make the change. So it's time for you to start improving. And if we can, as I said, if we reframe that idea of pain is against you, and instead of it's a trained response and it's trying to help you, and it's just everything is going off, the signals are going off, and we've trained ourselves to let the signals off very early, and we look at changing that. It's like when you get dust in a fire alarm and it goes off all the time. That's basically what's happening. But it's a burn spot, so it's like a fire alarm that we can clean the dust out of, and we can reset it, and we can hit that factory reset. Takes a bit of time, but it can be done. But as I said, once you feel like the body and the mind are in two different places, the mind wants to improve but the body isn't following, you're halfway there, because now you're okay, like you start to look for new ways of fixing it, and you start to look for ways that I can start to improve. And then in a lot of cases, it's that understanding the body isn't actually fighting against you, and that it just needs time to heal, and it needs time to recover, and it needs time to change, and that it's not going to change overnight. Then that's when you can start really improving. So in this case, a lot of times it's best to reach out for help. It's best to ask somebody who knows what they're doing. You can continue to work on this. You can improve it over time. As I said, not all pain is an injury, so you can slowly but surely start building up your tolerance, but sometimes it's better to reach out for it. If we understand that fear can drive the pain, and it can drive our response and reaction to pain, then we can start working on improving that cycle. If we also understand that fear can start or restart the cycle that we have fallen into in the past, and we can start to work on that, then we can slowly but surely, it's baby steps, but we're going to get there. It's really important to overcome this fear and then to focus on regaining confidence. If you're looking at long-term improvement, I've talked about in this whole podcast, I've been looking at fear as well. I said earlier on that there's different levels to it, but once you have overcome that fear, then you start working on confidence. And once you've overcome the confidence, then you're building everything else around it. You're building on the physical, you're building your tolerance, you're building up your conditioning again. It becomes so common to us that the fear of change actually stops us making that positive change to our lives, because we are scared or we're afraid that if we make any change, things can only get worse. And we forget that there's actually two ways to it. There's a positive and a negative. If we make the right change, even though it might be negative in the moment, in the long term, it's going to be positive for us. We become so familiar with change as negative that we begin to always associate it with negative outcomes. And it could just be due to us having bad experiences in the past with, as I was mentioning, with your doctors, with your chiropractors, with your physios, with your medical professionals. That could be really contributing to this, especially if you've been led down that path of taking painkillers and taking MRIs and taking surgical options. All of these are just quick fixes for a persistent or chronic long-term issue that aren't going to work. Instead, we need to consider what other approaches are going to integrate that mind-body, and what other approaches are going to help us to understand first what's going on. Because if we don't understand it, if you're looking for somebody else to give the responsibility to somebody else to fix it, you're going to continue with your cycle. You're going to continue in that cycle of it kicks up, you go, hopefully someone fixes it. If they don't fix it, you go to the next person, you go to the next person. If you take responsibility and then you say, okay, it's up to me to fix it, and I can have somebody to guide me down the path, or something to guide me down the path, and will tell me what's right or wrong, and what I can work on, and what I can improve on. But I'm not expecting anyone else to give me a magic pill and say it's over. Like, you give me this and I'm going to be good to go. Once you start to have that mindset, then you're going to change. Then you're going to improve it. And then you're going to start getting back to the life that you want to get back to. but it does really come back to that. I'm going to take responsibility for this. I'm going to work on overcoming my fears. I'm going to work on regaining confidence. I'm going to start to work on building my activity levels up, understanding what my triggers are, what's causing me pain, reflect on it, look back on it, educate myself around everything that's there. Really, education is the key to this. It's the key to freedom in a lot of cases for this stuff. And then have a structured plan. Something you can say, okay, I'm going to do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'm going to take my weekends off. I'm going to start building up my walking. I'm going to start building up my running. I'm going to start working my way back into the gym. If it flares up, I'm not back at square one. That's the thing. People say, okay, flared up, throw it all, baby out with the bathwater. I'm done and dusted. I need to start something new. That's what happens to people a lot of the time. But once we understand that it's a longer term journey and that you can work on this and you can fix it, that's how you make that change. And that is all I'm going to talk about in the podcast today. And I really appreciate you listening in. I hope I was able to shed some light and give you better ideas about what's going on and what could be contributing to the issue staying around longer than it is. Hopefully I was able, some of that resonated with you and that you were able to take things from it and that you can start to work on it. Now, in a lot of cases, people don't know where to start with this. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about the program that I have out, and I'm going to talk about it. You can see if it's something that it's for you or it's not for you, and you can see if it's something that you're interested in as well. Right now, I have a program. It's a Spine Initiative program, and it's tackling a lot of these issues. The goal of the program is basically just, it's a course, I should say, more so than a program, because it's based on education, reflection, and then exercise. So you're looking at educating yourself around the triggers, what's going on, and what the actual cause of it is. That a lot of it is about, okay, right, we know what the acute injury is, we know what a chronic injury is, this is how we separate them, this is what the symptoms of a chronic is, or persistent pain is, this is the symptoms of a acute pain. When you get a flare-up, this is what you need to do, and this is how you fix it. I give you all the tactics, I give you all the strategies to fix it, and then it's just about implementing them. And then I employ this, I push this idea of Kaizen. It's an interesting Japanese philosophy, that you take the things that work and you apply them and you keep them there. And the things that don't work, you get rid of them. I think a lot of people, with exercise, when they go, they're given loads of things and let's try these out, or just do these and see if they work. And then they don't work, so they go to the next practitioner and they go to the next one. With this, I give you different options. Try this one out. If it works, perfect. If there's one part of it that doesn't work, then you stop doing that part and you try to integrate something else. And it's that idea of finding the things that work for you in your lifestyle and working them into your lifestyle that has helped so many people so far with the course. And that's a big part of what I love in the course, is that you have your options and then you can pick out what works for you and what things that you enjoy. And then the second part of the course is it's built in with mobility and movement exercises to build strength and to help you to turn down that overactive nervous system and heal that burn spot. And the way we do this, as I was saying, it's through structured exercises and movements. We combine that with a couch to 5K style. It's not exactly couch to 5K, but it will help you get from the couch to a 5K. So I guess it's easier to put that title on it. And the idea of the couch to 5K, or the running program, is that when I'm working with people, especially if they've been dealing with this persistent back pain for a long time that's held them out of activity, a lot of people said to me that when they were able to build up their running to the 5K mark, that was the point that they felt that they had made a significant improvement, in that they could see the steps that it took to get there, because they knew when they ran at the start, okay, I ran a kilometer and then I had pain and I used these tactics to take care of the pain and I used these movements to calm it down, and then I was able to run 1.5 and then I was able to go to 2 and then I was able to get 3 and then I was able to build it up. And it was able to, once they hit the 5K mark, they could see the progress and they could see the process to getting there in the first place. So it's a powerful, powerful, powerful way of building it up. And it will show you that if you continue on this path and you continue with the exercises and you continue with the movements and you continue to push on with everything and the education, that you can get rid of this thing for good. It will get rid, what I should say is, you're going to have flare-ups along the way. There's no question. That's common. I wouldn't lie and say it's going to be clean and clear, but I want you to have flare-ups, because every time you have a flare-up, it's not going to be very bad. because you'll have the strategies and the tactics and everything to use and to work on, and you'll understand the signs of flare-up, so you'll be able to nip it in the bud. But it'll mean that you've hit your limit, you have a higher tolerance, you're more conditioned, you're in a better position than you were the week before, and then you continue to do that. You do it for weeks. You focus on it for 6 weeks, and you look back and you see the improvement that you've had. And I cannot emphasize how powerful this is for the people who have been dealing with a persistent pain that's keeping them out of the active lifestyle and the lifestyle that they enjoy. So if you want to check it out, it's the Spine Initiative. I'll put it in the description here. I also have a free guide that you can check out. It'll help you to understand what the triggers are. It'll help you understand what the burn spot is and what's actually causing the issue itself. Check that out as well. You can download it. And as I said, it's like maybe 1,500 words. Read through it. It will give you a better idea. And then the last thing I would say is I have another podcast on, if you want to go at this alone, I have another podcast on understanding the chronic issue. It's very similar to the guide. And then I have another podcast, which is about 3 before this, on how to fix it exactly. So if you want to go at it alone, you can do that. You can download the guide, you listen to the podcast, and then listen to the other podcast, and that will set you on your tracks to fix it. And if you need a bit more structure, or if you want help with that, then you check out the Spine Initiative and you can download it and you can get straight into it. And I'm also, for certain people who need it, I'm working with them one-to-one to help them through the course for the ones who have a lot more questions. So check that out and get in contact with me if you need anything. It's Mobility Tuner on Instagram. Hopefully I was able to shed some light and help you with this on this podcast. I really, really, really appreciate you listening. If there's anyone you feel will need this podcast or that you feel would learn from it, I would love if you could send it on, because it goes a long way in promoting it, and hopefully it can help someone else too. Just to recap, so you're not left with loads of information. As I said, there's many knock-on effects when you're dealing with an injury. We often become very afraid of doing anything, and then this can contribute to the deconditioning, and it contribute to the negative thought processes that we go in. Then we start to feel that it's only going to progress with age and it's only going to get worse, which can leave us hopeless a lot of times. We'll feel that we're not going to enjoy life because we have to always consider back pain. And then we'll feel that the mind and the body are fighting against each other. When we understand that the fear drives pain, we can understand that we can fix it. And we can understand that this oftentimes is a learned response. So check out those podcasts. Check out the spineinitiative.com spineinitiative.com. Let me correct that. No, the spineinitiative.com. And you can just check the link in this bio. And I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and rehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.